Hello and welcome. This is Direct Talk. On today's session, we'll be discussing Eritrea's involvement in the war in Tigray. I am joined by Meressa Tsehaye. He is a Horn of Africa Peace and Security Analyst. Meressa, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with why do you think the Eritreans have fully engaged in the war in Tigray?
In fact, it's a very complex question. Eritrea is fully engaging in this war. Not only engaging, this time Eritrea is leading the war. The Ethiopian forces are under the direct control of Isaias Afwerki and the Eritrean generals. And in fact, the war is coming from Eritrea, like during the time of Mussolini. The war against Tigray is directed from Eritrea, and the Ethiopian army is fully under the Eritrean control. And Isaias is, especially since 2018, Isaias is trying to address his historical ambitions, security ambitions, as well as his hope to become the big man of the whole. There are historical reasons. In fact, Isaias Afwerki is a leader. The first leader of Eritrea. Eritrea is a small and young state, a post-colonial state, and he wanted to build a strong Eritrea in terms of military. He aspired since 1994. He was hoping that Eritrea will be the Israel of the Horn in terms of military aspects, German of the Horn in terms of infrastructure, Sweden in terms of social justice, and more importantly, Singapore of the Horn of Africa in terms of urbanizations. And this vision was almost aborted because of his warmongering policy, especially after the 98-2000 war, Eritrea war. After that, Isaias was humiliated, especially after the Operation Sunset under the Ethiopian Defense Force led by the TPLF of the time. So he was humiliated and his ambition was aborted. Then he was waiting for 2 decades to organize all opposition forces against the TPLF, Ethiopian opposition forces, Somalian opposition forces, Eritrean opposition forces. And in 2018, it was a golden opportunity for Isaias Afwerki to reinvent his failed ambition, that is reinventing Singapore of the Horn, by controlling Menelik Palace, which is led by Abiy Ahmed. Now Abiy Ahmed is a junior partner. Not only a junior partner, Isaias he really becomes a patron. So Isaias, the historical reason is he wants to see the small state of Eritrea, young state of Eritrea, but to become big, strong, and prosperous Eritrea by plundering the resources from Ethiopia and Sudan. And importantly, Ethiopia is considered as a source of labor, source of market, source of wealthy. But in order this plan to be successful, he wants to make sure that the TPLF should be out of the equation. So the first reason is in 1998, Isaias was humiliated by the TPLF EPRDF, so he wanted to rehabilitate himself and then eliminate the TPLF as well as the people of Tigray, because he considered Tigray and TPLF as the problem to his ambition in the Horn of Africa. At the same time, there are also historical reasons. You know, Tigray is the core nation in the Horn of Africa. Tigray is almost the root in terms of the software of the Horn nations, in terms of history, in terms of art, in terms of religion, in terms of statehood, in terms of even patriotism, nationalism, independence. You know, the Battle of Adwa is considered as a symbol of resistance, independence. So in order Eritrea to be strong states, it needs historical justifications. So if there is Tigray on the side of Eritrea, which is stable and strong, so that Eritrea's legitimacy will be undermined. So he wants to eliminate Tigray, undermine Tigray, so that he will get the opportunity to build a new state which is legitimate and militarily powerful. So the second reason is Isaiah's ambition is, for Eritrea is too small for Isaiah, but he wants to be the big man of the Horn of Africa. He wants to be the king of the Horn of Africa, and he considers the African states are fragile, weak. So it is easy to make the Horn of African states destabilized, so that get the resources from the Horn of Africa and build a strong Eritrea. In this case, the way to get this ambition to be successful is, first he must be eliminated at PLF and Tigrayan people. That's why he came up with this slogan, game over and politika hatswo. So the politika hatswo means it's a political cleaning, that cleaning the TPLF legacies. Not only the TPLF legacy, the Tigrayan legacies. The Tigrayan legacy is a federalist legacy, a self-determination legacy that mobilizes all forces who are determined for self-determination, equality of nations and nationalities. So Isaias Afwerki's project is a unitary state. His slogan is clear: one people, one heart. United we stand, one people, one heart. So Tigray is a bad model for Isaias, because in order to achieve his policy, that is one people, one heart, or unitary state and big man of the Horn, he wanted to clean this legacy, so that the other reason could be the nation building problem. Eritrea wants to be unitary state, but the Tigrayan forces are self-determination forces, federalist forces, so that he wants to eliminate the Tigray and its history and its federalism legacy. The other reason, he is trying, he is hoping desperately to become the leader of the Horn after Meressa. During the time of Meressa was a big man of the Horn. Not only big man of the Horn, he was a big man of Africa. He was leading the African leaders in all aspects. So he was undermined during the time Meressa. Now he becomes, he doesn't consider Abiy Ahmed, Formaggio, all the Horn of African leaders as strong as Isaias Afwerki. So he wants to be the leader of regional integration. But the problem is, Isaias is a destabilizer. Isaias' state is a sanctioned state, almost for 20 years. In international system, he is known for his crime against humanity, human rights violations, isolationist foreign policy, and destabilizer in the regions, sponsoring any rival group in the Horn of Africa. So his policy is not out of stability and peaceful foreign policy. Rather, Eritrea will be, Isaias Afwerki's Eritrea will be strong and prosperous only if the region is destabilized. This is his foreign policy, because he knows that he failed in international political economy engagement. He is already sanctioned, isolated, authoritarian. His state was named repeatedly as the North Korea of Africa. Not only North Korea of Africa, but also the Somalia of Africa. That means he eliminated the Eritrean generations. He forces them to leave Eritrea. And those who live in Eritrea, they were forced to be in the national conscription. So Eritrea is a battalion state, not a democratic. There is no possibility in Eritrea for reform, democracy, development. So Eritrea is a battalion state, simply a garrison state, that the Eritrean citizens are expected to be in the trench to fight an imaginary enemy. So they consider that the Eritrean are fighting all big powers in the world, including the Americans. So for this reason, he wants to, when we aggregate his vision, by engaging in this war, Isaias Afwerki wants to achieve three important things. The first one is he wants to annihilate the TPLF and the Tigrayans, because he was humiliated in the 1998 war. The second reason is he wanted to remake the Horn of Africa, reconfigure the Horn of Africa, remap the Horn of Africa, so that he's coming with this policy of the Berlin Conference of the Horn. That means he wanted to redraw the map of the Horn of Africa, So he wanted to outsize Eritrea, a bigger Eritrea that includes Tigray. If possible, he, he, like the Mussolini, like the fascist Italian leader Mussolini, he wants to make Tigray part of Eritrea so that he aspires to create greater Eritrea by remapping the Horn, drawing the map of the Horn of Africa. By doing so, ultimately, he will destroy the Ethiopian state. In the first place, he wants to annihilate the Tigrayan peoples. He wants to eliminate the people, the history, legacy, including leadership. So he mobilized all the Amharas, all opposition forces to Tigray. He mobilized the Amhara, he mobilized Abiy Ahmed, he mobilized Formaggio, other international supporters. The reason is anyone he can support for Isaias Afwerki to eliminate and annihilate Tigray will be considered as a partner. But ultimately, after annihilating Tigray and then making Tigray part of Greater Eritrea, then he wanted to destroy the Ethiopian state. So that because he has this syndrome, Isaias Afwerki syndrome, that is a small state syndrome. He is not happy with bigger states like Ethiopia because they consider these are colonial states, expansion states, so that it's better to disintegrate Ethiopia so that we will have a number of power centers, small regions. So Tigray will be part of Eritrea, and the other regions will be hinterlands for Eritrea. The other regions in Ethiopia will be hinterland. Simply, he considered to as a resource center, market center, labor centers, and finally, he wants to build a bigger political economy out of extracting the resource of the Horn of Africa. So the mission could be defeating Tigray and then remapping the borders of the Horn of Africa, then creating a greater Eritrea by including Tigray, and then finally dismantling the Ethiopian states. So in the Horn of Africa, Eritrea will be the only viable, strong states. Then the other states will be simply hinterlands, resource centers, like during the time of colonialism. So his ambition is a colonial ambition. He want to be to repeat Mussolini's policy of creating. During the time of Mussolini, there was Italian East African colony. Now Isaias is trying to build that colony. Eritrea will be the political and military center. The others will be under Eritrea's leadership. So Ethiopia will be dismantled, Tigray will be defeated. Then Isaias' ambition is expected to be the big man of the Horn, not only the Horn. If things are going well, he wants to be like the Gaddafi of Africa. So he is actively leading, engaging in the war. But he is trying to succeed his policy even by committing genocide. So for him, genocide is an instrument of state formation. So war makes states, so he wants to commit genocide, eliminate the Tigrayans.
Oh, okay. Given the full involvement of the Eritrean forces, what could be the possible developments in individual actors in this war, in Tigray, Ethiopia, Eritrea, as well as in the region as a whole?
Ethiopia, out of this war, Ethiopia will be fragile, dismantled. In fact, I can say that this time Ethiopia is fully failed state. Its sovereignty, territorial integrity is already violated. Ethiopia is in unprecedentedly in civil war. For me, Ethiopia this time is not only failed state, it is going to the collapsed state level. So its sovereignty is already dismantled, its economy is collapsed. So the anchor state in the Horn of Africa is now, it becomes irrelevant. Simply it's a colony of Eritrea. So Ethiopia will be in crisis. The anchor state will be a collapsed state. Even it is more fragile than the collapsed state of Somalia. So for Ethiopia, this war will result in the collapse of the anchor state. It will create economic crisis, humanitarian crisis. I can say Ethiopia will be a geopolitical catastrophe of 21st century Like in the 20th century, the collapse of Soviet Union was considered a geopolitical catastrophe. Yugoslavia was considered as geopolitical catastrophe. Now Ethiopia is 21st century geopolitical catastrophe. That means the collapse of Ethiopia will destabilize the Horn as well as Africa. So the result for Ethiopia will be state collapse. Now, after this war, this war consumes Ethiopia's economy. The war destroys Ethiopian economy, Ethiopia's military, the moral as well as the legacy of the Ethiopian military. Now the Ethiopian military is, I can consider it not a military, not a national defense, rather a mercenary. Simply, it is the Askari of Eritrea. It's a mercenary. So Ethiopia will be in trouble, it will be crisis. For Tigray, Tigray has two options. If Tigray survives this war, so that we will have a new Tigray that corrects its historical problems. Tigray has been fighting for self-determination. Tigray has been the land of civilization, a land of independence, the land of peasant as well as urban mobilizations. Tigray was a land of change in the Horn of Africa. Not only a land of change, Tigray is also the software of the Horn African society. It is the software of Eritrea, the software of Ethiopia. So, but unfortunately, Tigray becomes a victim of the Ethiopian states as well as the Eritrean states. Tigray was supporting Eritrean self-determination, including Tigray, by its leaders, the TPLF was recognizing Eritrea's independence. Ethiopia under the TPLF EPRDF was a very successful state, unlike its history of civil war. Unfortunately, Tigray becomes a victim of the Ethiopian economy as well as the Eritrean statehood. So we will have a different Tigray. That means Ethiopia and Eritrea together, they commit genocide against Tigray. They commit war crime, ethnic cleansing, all types of human atrocities. So the reason is why the international community also failed to understand Tigray, its contribution, its legacy, as well as its contemporary questions. So the war will result that a new Tigray will be emanated out of this war. That means a new Tigray means Tigray has to follow a new track. As to my opinion, Tigray, through internationally observed referendum, after winning this war, in the first place, the war has two phases. At this time, it's all about survival. It's all about self-defense. But after that, Tigray will determine its fate, its future through referendum. So that, and finally, based on the decision of the Tigrayan people, we will have a different Tigray. If we remain in Ethiopia, we will have more empowered Tigray in Ethiopia. So Tigray will not continue as simply a region in the Federal Democratic State of Ethiopia. We will have a strong Tigray. But if the Eritrean forces and the Ethiopian forces able to undermine Tigray's capacity this time, so that we will have a destabilized Horn. If Tigray fails to defend and win this war, the Horn of Africa will be in trouble. Eritrea will face, the Tigrayan war will have a domino effect on the security, diplomacy, and the Horn. In fact, the international community is failing to prevent this scenario. Everyone is trying to defend Eritrea and Ethiopia, being they are states. Ethiopia and Eritrea states, so that the Tigrayan crisis is understood within the framework of Ethiopian state or Eritrean state. But if the international community fails to understand Tigray, if Tigray's resistance is defeated, and finally we will have a destabilized Horn, because the winners will be authoritarian, fascist, and genociders. The genociders will not maintain a strong state. Rather, the stability of Tigray will have a positive impact on Eritrea as well as on Ethiopia. But if Tigray is defeated, the Horn region will be in crisis.
What do you think should be the role of the international community to avert this catastrophe?
The international community, its perspective is wrong. the international community, when I say international community, I am referring to the superpowers as well as international institutions like United Nations, African Union, and the superpowers like United States, Europe, and Russia and China, including Britain. You know, their understanding of Tigray is disaster. You know, they are trying to understand Tigray's problem in the name of state. You know, Tigray is considered as a region within the territorial integrity of Ethiopia. Tigray is a region, so Tigray's issue is an internal issue within the Ethiopian security and political framework. But the reality on the ground is Tigray is beyond Ethiopia, beyond Eritrea. Tigray is the security, political, historical software of Ethiopia and Eritrea. The collapse of Tigray will be the collapse of Eritrea and the collapse of Ethiopia. But the international community, you know, the international order is known, it's a state order. So the superpowers as well as international institutions are still struggling to defend the states, not the people. That's why they fail to understand the place of Tigray in Ethiopia, the place of Tigray in the Horn of Africa, the place of Tigray on Eritrea's internal affairs. So they wanted to defend the status by compromising the interests of the people, even though the international community is preaching human rights, humanity, the responsibility to protect democracy, and this all. You know, if we take the case of Ukraine and Tigray, Ukraine is a state. International community, not only a state but also geopolitically important in relation to Russia. And in fact, Tigray is geopolitically important in relation to the Nile as well as the Red Sea. Tigray is, the Horn of Africa is one of the hot spots of geopolitical conflicts. But Tigray is considered as a region within Ethiopia. But Tigray has never think that Tigray is a region, rather Tigray's contribution is beyond its legal status. Its legal status is region. Tigray is still under Ethiopian sovereignty, but Tigray's contribution is beyond legal status. That means everything, the ideas, history, security framework will be emanated from Tigray. So Tigray is not only a region, but also its contribution, its legacy, its role. And geopolitically, Tigray is a pivot in the Horn of Africa. Tigray is a center and pivot. The one who controls Tigray will control the Horn. The one, you know, if a Democrat, if the self-determination forces controls Tigray, the whole Horn of Africa will be stabilized. But if Isaias and Abiy controls Tigray, the whole Horn of Africa will fall in the hands of authoritarian, genocidal, and fascist regimes. But the international community still is trying to defend legal status of the states. But in the end, I hope the international community will regret. Tigray will be the winner. If Tigray fails, the Horn of Africa will be in crisis, and the international community will face geopolitical crisis, catastrophe, humanitarian crisis. Even the Europeans, the Americans, they will not defend their interests because the Tigrayan war so far undermines the military capacity, economic capacity, moral and psychological capacity of the Eritrean and the Ethiopian forces. Now, Tigray is fighting with two national defense forces of Eritrea and Ethiopia. But so far, the TDF is annihilating them, defending them, and fighting for the last 2 years. So we will have a very fragile Eritrean defense force, very fragile Ethiopian defense force. In the end, Tigray's war will defeat Ethiopia's economic capacity, military capacity, security capacity. The same is true for Eritrea. And then ultimately the international community will regret that. They undermine Tigray, but Tigray will be the pacemaker of geopolitical problem in the Horn of Africa. That's why, for me, the solution should be, you know, they should avoid this legal status of actors in the Horn of Africa. They will not defend the states. So it's better to support Tigray, to sanction Isaias Afwerki and Abiy Ahmed, to prevent the resurgence of fascism and genocidal regimes. If the international community fails to do so, then the result will be not only for Tigray, the result will be a security problem, geopolitical problem, humanitarian crisis. Even it will disrupt the Horn order. So the Horn of Africa will be a region of failed states. We have Somalia, a failed state since 1991. So Ethiopia will be a collapsed state. Ethiopia's collapse will have a dominant effect on the neighboring states. We will have South Sudan, North Sudan. So the whole Horn of Africa, Eritrea will be a collapsed state. Then after that, the whole Horn will be a region of failed states, fascist regimes, a region where terrorist groups will prevail. So it's better to support Tigray, defend Tigray, without taking into account the international norms like defending the states. That's why everyone is failing on Tigray. The African Union is miserably failed on Tigray. The international community is failing. Even the Americans are committing strategic mistakes. The Americans, you know, in the first place, they were committing a strategic mistake by recruiting Abiy Ahmed and placing in the Minilik Palace. You know, Abiy Ahmed is he's incapable to understand the complexity of Ethiopian politics. And but you know, not only incapable, but also he's a reckless leader, unprecedented in Ethiopian history, that he's making alliance with the historical enemies of Ethiopia. He's priding Isaias Afwerki as a regional destabilizer. Now he is surrendering Ethiopia's sovereignty, economy, and military capacity to Isaias. Now Ethiopia is, you know, this time is under the colony of Eritrea, 21st century colony. That's why Abiy Ahmed is happy to make Ethiopia, you know, on one hand there are these slogans, Ethiopia is the only country never colonized, the symbol of Pan-Africanism, and these all things. Now Ethiopia is, this time is almost exposed that these are wrong narratives. Without Tigray, Ethiopia could not be independent. Ethiopia could not be center of Pan-Africanism. Ethiopia could not be anchor state. That's why the international community should recognize that the place of Tigray in Ethiopia and the whole. If they address Tigray's problem, then the Horn will be stabilized, so the international order will benefit out of it. If Isaias Afwerki and Abiy Ahmed win and undermine Tigray, and finally, the Horn of Africa will be a region of crisis. So it will negatively affect the international order. And then at that time, the United Nations, African Union, and superpowers will say, we were wrong. And Tigray will be proved right. So the international community has to revisit its policy.
But my question is, does the international community have these tools that can change the course in the immediate future?
So far, they have the factors on that, but they fail to make a political decision, a security decision. The problem is not the knowledge.
So you're telling me that they have the tools, but they are not taking actions?
The problem is their commitment. I don't think so. The Americans fail to understand what is going on the ground. They know it very well, but you know, they lack the commitment to punish Isaias Afwerki, to punish Abiy Ahmed, to stop. You know, the Americans have the capacity even to stop within a day, because they did it during the Yugoslavian civil war. They did it during the Libya crisis. But on Ethiopia, you know, they are still trying to defend Ethiopia, you know, maintaining Ethiopia's territorial integrity, sovereignty. But this will be simply meaningless speeches. They will not save Ethiopia. They will not save Eritrea. They will not save the whole. So what is important is the Americans should be committed, should be powerful, should be realistically engaging to avert a crisis in the Horn of Africa. If they fail, if they continue like in this idealist policy of defending Ethiopia, defending Eritrea, finally they will have a collapsed state of Ethiopia and Eritrea. And Isaias Afwerki, you know, he will not, because the Tigrayans will continue to fight. We will continue to fight for our survival, to defend our territorial integrity, to make our history of resistance, independence successful, so that we will fight until Tigray will be liberated. so that we will have a new face. If Isaias Afwerki and even they can control Mekelle, even in that time, the Tigrayan struggle will go, and then it will have a negative impact on the security regions in the Horn of Africa. So Tigrayan struggle cannot be undermined, cannot be annihilated. It has never been in history. The Tigrayans has the history of resistance, the history of patriotism, so that finally Tigray will prevail. That's why the international community needs to act now and to punish Isaias Afwerki, punish Abiy Ahmed, so that they will save Tigray as well as they will save the region in general. So I don't think so. They are lacking knowledge. Rather, their commitment. Their commitment is simply because they want to defend the states, not the people. So defending the states will not be a solution. So that in the end, we have the history of a collapsed Soviet Union. We have the history of a collapsed Yugoslavia, collapsed Somalia, Libya. So status can be saved. At the same time, there is a possibility of disintegration. So finally, everyone will be the loser, and the superpower should act now to defend Tigray, to defend Ethiopia and Eritrea. So what is important this time is not words. There are these press releases. We are gravely concerned. We are tired of these words. So it's better to act. If the Americans are committed, they can stop the war even within a day. Even they defended Kuwait within a week. So the problem is the lack of commitment on the superpowers, especially when I say superpowers, I'm referring to Europe and United States. Russia and China are clear. They are supporting Abiy Ahmed. So I don't expect any new things from Russia and China rather, but I expect from the Americans and the Europeans if they want to act.
Thank you so much, Meressa.
Thank you.